We're going to talk about abuse. We talked about behaviors, but we're going to talk a little bit of specifics. We're not going to go right into everything, but we're going to do an overview of what we're working to prevent from happening here and what we're looking for signs of. So that's what I'm going to talk about next. So our policies are here to prevent things from happening. 4 categories of abuse. We want to prevent sexual abuse from happening, and we want to be aware and look for signs of it happening. And I have a handout that was that's called Reporting Abuse, Neglect and Abuse. And I would like all my faith formation leaders who are here to get a copy of it. Each group will get one. But if anybody wants to have another copy of this policy or this handout, I can share it with you. So what are we talking about? I'm just going to do this high level. As we're saying from the fan, that's exciting. So sexual abuse. The sexual exploitation of children in any form is abuse. Allowing a child to engage in or expose them to any form of inappropriate sexual situations falls under this category of abuse. Physical abuse. These are non-accidental injuries and harm that come from a child's caretaker. In this policy, and not in this policy, this is the policy. In the handout, it lists signs. So these are typical signs of sexual abuse, signs of physical abuse. Emotional abuse usually happens when it's connected with the other two. But that one is, if a child is being abused in another way, emotional abuse can be, I'm reading as what I just said to you. Sorry. In brief, emotional abuse stunts a child's emotional growth with threats, rejection, and insults. So it may not be physical, but it is still abuse. And neglect is the 4th one that we are seeking to avoid again, and we're seeking to be aware of signs of. When a child's basic needs are not met, that's also considered abuse. Caretakers must provide food and shelter, medical needs, educational needs, and emotional needs for their children. So that is something that as mandatory reporters, if you see signs of this abuse, we'll talk about what that we need to report that to keep our community safe. So reporting. So any of us, if we're aware of any of these kinds of abuse as well as behavior, or charge it, or if you're aware of someone who's been arrested and charged with something, that also falls in with reporting to us. Like the church staff would like to know about that kind of stuff, so there's a couple things in here. We're talking about reporting 2 different things. One is if you see the abuse and you suspect that there's abuse, it's your job as mandatory reporters to report that. And we want to be aware that you're making that report. We could be there with you when you're making that report, but the person who has that experience needs to be the one. I can't do that for you unless I'm the one who witnessed it. And so this information, we eventually want it to go to Reverend Allison, myself, and the members of the Safe Congregation Responsible. Are there any questions about that? Does that make sense?
Just a comment that, if you're suspicious because someone's bruised or hungry or looking very tired, talk to you first. Because I wouldn't report just that out of the blue.
And I think I can help, yes. The law mandates that who you would report, so you could report neglect for an older person to the BEAS, which stands for, I memorized it, but that was a few days
Bureau
ago.
of Elderly Adult Services.
Thank you. Can you say that one more time?
Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services.
And that number is on this handout here, and we will figure out how to get that to our volunteers who might work with vulnerable adults. And then there's DCYF, the Division of Child, Youth, and Families, and that's Child Protective Services. That's who you would reach out to if you were needing to report something. And I have the forms that you can fill out to help you through your conversation. But that's something that we need to train you on as someone who might be working with these populations. Information on that is on page 33 of the policy. And then, so again, This is another time when if this comes up, the Safe Congregation Response Team will be there to work through that and support you and support all those involved in the work that has, in whatever has happened. So we're reporting possible abuse within UCN, if you've seen that, or abuse by a family member or another individual, or suspicion of it, or an ongoing investigation. If you find out that someone was arrested for some kind of abuse, of sexual abuse or physical abuse, we would like to know about that. And what do we do if we find out that that's happened? We do welcome people, but not all behaviors. So one of the things that the Safe Congregation Response Team does, and there's more information about that in the policy, is we may come up with a limited access agreement. And so that it'll vary depending on each individual's circumstances, but we do have within our policy what we do to keep our vulnerable population safe. And it might be that someone is not allowed to volunteer with children. It might be that they're not allowed in the faith formation wing at all. It might be that they're only allowed when there are no children in the building. It depends on what it is, but our Safe Congregation Response Team will come up with that appropriate agreement to keep our children and vulnerable populations safe. The SCRT, as you know who is on that, one of the things that we also do is keep in mind the pastoral needs of all those involved. Appropriate boundaries. This is what we're looking for in order to create an atmosphere where these things that I've just talked about won't even be able to happen. We're going to do our best. Don't be alone with a child or youth in any part of the building. So you need to be in the presence of another adult who's not related to you. That is a part of our policy that we also need to follow. So we do have a requirement that I have two adult faith formation people in a classroom. It may be an adult and a teen if it's younger kids. There's always windows on the doors. There's visibility. We're not creating spaces in our church programs when an adult can be alone with a child. And one thing to be aware of is, do you notice another adult trying to be alone with a child? That's what I'm asking you to be the eyes and ears of. That's a red flag, and I want to know about it. And you can just go and be there and be the other adult, right? Sometimes just being that presence and let us know. Don't come to me and be like, oh no, they're alone. Like, no, go be there, and then we'll have a conversation later. So this includes in person and online or on phone through texting. We are not creating or allowing spaces where adults will be alone with children, anyone under 18. So when we're working on how we communicate with our youth, a lot of them are texting now. I'm not going, and I don't want any of my youth advisors to directly text our youth individually or reach out to them online in any way individually. It's all as a group thing, either as a full group or having another adult on there. Just like you're not going to be alone in a room with a team, you're not going to be in online in a space with one other child. So it could be CCing myself or Allison or their parent if that works for you. So sometimes we have youth who are worship associates. We may at some point again have a youth who's a pastoral care associate. So there are times when church members may be reaching out to teens even if they're not a faith formation leader. So I just want you all to be aware that this is part of our communication policy. And that is on a page in our policy, and I'll tell you where that is in a minute. So another appropriate boundaries is we need you all to be sober when you're around our vulnerable populations. So do not consume alcohol before or while you're working with our children and youth. That's in our policy. As well as drugs. And so there's an asterisk next to it because that doesn't mean like cough medicine and like drugs that, medication that you need for you to be your best, healthiest self, but not other drugs. Okay, so there were some questions before about touch. I made this into like questions. So A, B, or C, or all the above, or just a combination of the two. What is healthy touch in our church? Who can tell me what the answer is? Okay, I'm hearing B. Will not in any way intend to be sexually stimulating or for sexual gratification. That is correct. there's also more to this. There's another one that's also correct. Which one is also correct? A or C?
A.
A. It'll include but not limited to high fives, hugs, hand on shoulder, pat on back. That's the kind of touching with children when another adult is present that is okay. And we're not saying that you can never touch anyone else in church. Yes.
For A, does that still include consent?
It does include consent, and that's an SI. So one of the things we talked about is consent. That is number C here. So I'm just going to give this to you. It's all of the above, because I just want to give you all this, and I want to get through this. The healthy touch is respectful and age appropriate. So I'm not going to say this is how we touch children in our church. If you've got a 4-year-old and you've got an 18-year-old, it's going to be different. But it only happens in the presence of another adult. And it respects the members of a vulnerable population, and I want to say anybody, the whole population, their preference is to be touched. One of the things that I'm personally working on is ask someone if they would like a hug rather than going in and giving them a hug. And Ben shared this with me. One way to do that, instead of walking toward them and being like, "Can I give you a hug?" That's like, I'm already doing it pretty much. You can take a step back and be like, "Would you like a hug?" Or I could say like, I know, I'm not even telling you what you're doing. You could be like, hug or high five, and then it's clear, or like wave and stuff like that. So there are different ways to do it. I'm not saying we're not allowed to hug each other in the church, but with vulnerable populations, especially with children, it really needs to be them initiating the hug, and it's short and sweet and not too long, but it's loving. Okay? Yeah, that would be awesome. I have no idea what's next.